This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 190.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. My name is Ramsey Majaba, and this is We the Sales Engineers, episode 190. So we're getting close to 100 to 200, and I'm very excited about that. We have another great guest, as usual, and her name is Julie Maul today. She is the Global Director for Solutions Consulting at Elastic Path. We didn't talk about Elastic Path specifically. We just talked about her. And we covered so many different topics, but I think the main thing we wanted to discuss was how sales engineering was great role for a working mother. And everything she said about working mother, I'm like, yep, that works for a working father as well. So basically, this show is about making decisions in your career to help you with the family, but we go way beyond that. We go into leadership. We go into what you look for in a leader, what leaders do, because we can see certain things within when we're individual contributors working with leaders. We can see certain things that they do, but there's so much more that goes on in the background that we're never privy to. So we discussed some of that as well. We talked about a lot of things. So how about we just jump into the show and you guys can hear what we talk about. Good evening, Julie. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Are you used to having a full conversation with someone and then start recording and repeating the same conversation again?
To some degree, because it's usually business oriented. So we'll get the meeting started, and I'll start going into some sort of explanation. Then it's wait, we need to stop recording. We start recording, and then we'll do it again. Yep, you know the drill.
Yeah. Okay. So this is not strange to you.
No.
But we've been talking for a few minutes. For those who don't know you, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Julie Maul, and I am the Director of Solution Engineering for Elastic Path, which is an e-commerce software company. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and 2 kids. That's in a nutshell who I am.
Okay, nice. So you're currently a director.
Yes.
At Elastic Path. You mentioned that. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, you were also a director. So actually, let me step back.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find sales engineering?
So I came into sales engineering by way of consulting, actually. So this was many, many years ago. And I was doing implementations for also an e-commerce software company, but this was way back, Commerce 1.0, like early 2000s. And, in that role as a project manager, oftentimes a salesperson would ask me to come in into one of their meetings, into one of their sales cycles, and, explain to customers how we run implementations, how we help them be successful, and those types of things. And, I really enjoyed that. I loved the customer facing stuff. And then at some point, a sales colleague of mine said, hey, Julie, you really ought to consider solution engineering or sales consulting. You might be really good at it, just given that kind of exposure to customer stuff. And so I did. I tried it back then, it's just like, 2001, 2002. And really for the rest of my career have been in some form of sales engineering or solution consulting, stepping out here and there doing other things, but this is definitely what I love to do.
Okay. I don't know if you I know you said it's been a while, but do you recall the difference in your interactions with customers when you were implementation and then when you became a sales engineer? Did it change?
It did a little bit, and I think, but I tried to not have it change too much in that, one of the great things about coming out of consulting into sales engineering was like hands-on experience with the product, exposure to what customers were successful doing or struggled doing. And, I think that lended a sort of credibility to those interactions I would have with customers was that experience. And so, over the years, I've tried to, the more I've gotten away from pure consulting and implementation, that nature of that conversation changes a little bit, but I still, now, like as a director and, kind of helping shape how opportunities are worked. At certain points I might want to bring in like an engineer or implementation consultant or something like that to bring back that kind of sense of, I don't want to say credibility because I take pride in being really honest in encounters with customers, but just the kind of real world aspect. This is what it's like day in, day out, and that type of thing. So that's been my experience.
I personally struggled with it. Before I became a sales engineer, I was a network design engineer, and I always came in after the network was bought, and I just came in and designed it.
Yeah.
And when I talked to customers, I was very blunt. I was nice, but I was also like, my personality, I'm kind of a blunt person for some reason or another. You can blame my parents. And then when I became a sales engineer, I moved companies. So I lost that. I know the product. I'm not a different product. And it took me a while to get comfortable to going back to, I was always worried about what the customer would think. Or
being maybe slightly less blunt.
I'm back to being that. I don't know if it's because like I couldn't survive not doing that, or because I know my customers very well. I've been with the same customers for a few years now. But yeah, it took me a while to get over that. All right. So how did you work your way up to, this is not the first time you worked your way up to director?
Yeah, what I've loved about sales engineering and just the role in general, and this has been consistent over really the course of my, career, is the freedom to some degree that this role lends. In balance between, work and family, like the coronavirus, work at home type of restrictions. For me, that was just, same old, same old. I've always worked from home. I just haven't traveled much lately. But to get back to your question, I've found, I've stepped out and stepped back into the role over time, as my children were at different ages and things like that. And then I've always tried to balance the opportunity and the level of work with my life, basically. Sometimes that, that was individual contributor. And sometimes, like right now, I have, one kid's in college, one's in high school. I have a little bit more bandwidth, basically, to kind of try something new, smaller company, bigger role. And so, that's just generally how my career has been. I've really tried hard to balance it, with, staying in the workforce, but balancing it with my home life. And I think sales engineering has always lended itself super well to being able to do that.
I've worked with sales engineers who work 12-hour, 16-hour days. And when we were talking last time, you mentioned like it's the best job for a working mother. How do you make that decision, that split, where because you could work for 24 hours a day nonstop in this role, and if you do it, no one will tell you to stop. So how do you balance yourself and make sure you're not doing that?
Yeah, there are a few things. Like when the kids were small, if I had a big meeting that, I was prepping for, a lot of that you can do at night, right? If I'm not in a meeting where I had to, be either traveling or, on a conference call or something, then I could shift some of that just straight up prep work and run throughs and things like that to after the kids went to bed. And I always put my kids to bed really early, so it actually worked out well for me. And so, there was that aspect of it, especially when they were young. And then also I've just learned over time, like, and it's something I try and teach my kids too, which is that, you know what you know, right? And I'm not gonna like, majorly increase my ability to have more knowledge before a meeting by cramming, or like, to me, that whole just cram, just keep tweaking with something, and we're at some point you just have to rest on what you know. And in a meeting, if you're delivering a demo or a presentation to the customer, you also have to get comfortable with saying I don't know. And so that balance, I think, has helped me just, understand kind of the shift between this is what I can contribute to my work life, and it balances with my home life. And then over the arc of a career, some days I do work really well and parenting less well, and vice versa. And you just have to be comfortable with that. But I've always, in terms of progression in my career. I've always been a firm believer, and you do have to to some degree almost make yourself indispensable. Like I hardly ever say no to things, but because the relationship between a sales engineer and the salesperson is really built on trust. And so, like coming to a new company, you have to build that trust, and that's showing up and delivering and being, as well prepared as possible. But I know how to get to that well prepared a lot more efficiently now in my career than 20 years ago.
So it sounds like there's a lot of planning involved, like planning your time and your day. Then, like, if you didn't have kids, you just work all day. Like, does that sound about right?
Yeah, there's a rhythm. Look, I mean, and honest, like when it's during the school year, that's way easier because there's a natural rhythm to that. Once your kids are in school, for sure. Summer, it's a little more chaotic, and you kind of have a lot more plates spinning and moving around. My husband helps out tremendously. We both work from home, and we're now it's really super easy to communicate. I'm like, hey, can you go pick up my daughter from school today? I was in the middle of a big customer meeting. So there some planning, and then certain rhythms of life just help make that a little bit easier.
Okay. So, and in terms of like mindset and mentality, did it hurt to go from a director to an individual contributor, like that sacrifice that you had to do for your family?
For me, no. I mean, it was a very conscious decision I made, and I did that with a view towards not this is just what's happening in this moment, but this is what can happen, 6 months, a year, 18 months down the road, right? So when I made that, if I think back to the last time I did that, it was, not that long ago, where I, decided to move from a management role into an individual contributor role, but I knew the company I was going to would have a lot of opportunity available. And so I thought, well, individual contributor, prove yourself. And then the timing between my personal goals, life, family life balance and opportunity would likely align at some point. And they did.
Going from director to individual contributor, is there anything that you took from being a director that helped you be better as an individual contributor?
I almost think it's actually the other way around, right? Okay. Because as a manager and, managing a team of solution engineers, I'm very, like, I would never ask someone on my team to do something that I wasn't willing and able to do myself, right? And sometimes you have to step in if, someone's on vacation or if they're, whatever the extenuating circumstances. I think I still think of myself as a solution engineer. But I have a team that we collaborate with, and sometimes I still do meetings, and so I think for me I'm a better manager in that I'm open to still doing the work, right? So for me, that has been my lens as a manager is always keeping in mind that I need to step into those shoes and step out and step in, and kind of have a sense of what that what the concerns of the team are, what's the rapport with the reps, so for me the doing aspect is really important as a manager as well. You have to understand what the pressures are day to day, otherwise you become too distant, and my opinion is then you're not a great manager.
Right, like you're too far away from the field that you don't know what's going on, and now you're just working on theory.
Yeah, paper, approving things, and like that kind of stuff. And that's to some degree also what has shaped kind of how my career has been. When the opportunity as a manager gets too far, and then again, this is just for me and like how I like to work, and what I want out of my career is, if I get too far away from the customer and too far away from the product and too far away from what's happening on the ground, then for me, it's not doing what I love about the job, which is, helping companies be successful, helping software companies be successful selling product. So for me, that's what's important.
And so if that's what's important to you, I believe, and I'm not a manager, so I don't know. So it's a theory of mine. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more politics involved when you become a manager or director. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that your SEs might not know you do for them?
generally I'm pretty transparent. And what I tell folks on my team, whether it's a small team or a big team or whatever, is that I see my role as, to some degree, running air cover, right? I want to run air cover for you, meaning that, one, we have to have a close relationship and communication. I might sit in on meetings, and that's not necessarily to pick away at what you're doing, but to understand the full context, because I think we've all in this role been in a position where, we might get some interesting feedback from our account executive counterparts. Most of the time great, but sometimes maybe, constructive or critical or whatever. And, I want to be able to have that insight into what really went on, and, be able to run air cover, kind of like I said, but also, if it's something we need to work on, I want to have concrete examples. So that kind of thing, like just, being a buffer to some degree between sales and sales engineering. And then, also from the perspective of just, clearing the plate so we can all be effective at what we're doing, right? If there are things that we're getting asked to do, like at a bigger company where I was previously, there was a lot of extra activity that was asked. And sometimes it's beneficial, and sometimes it's just, are we doing it just to look like we're doing it or doing something? And again, I would try and run air cover on some of those things so that, the folks who really wanted to focus on being the best at their, job had that ability. So I think, like I said, I don't know that I would say they don't know that I do that, because I try and say, hey, look, this is what I want to do for you. I hope, and they should feel free to come to me and say, hey, this is going on. Can you help me out with that? And so I just try and keep that relationship open.
The reason I'm bringing that up is this podcast specifically caused some issues with my older company.
Oh, really?
And I never knew about it until my boss left. Like, he kind of blocked it. He stopped it from rolling down to me. And I never knew it happened until he left and said, Ramsey, be careful. This is what's happening above you. Like, as long as he was there, I was safe. Yeah. But I never knew that. He never told me that before, because he didn't want any bad feelings between me and his superiors.
For sure.
So that's why I'm saying, like, there's a lot of things that you guys do that I would never know.
Yeah.
Like that air cover. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah.
There's a lot of information that's not passing through. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that that air cover is going to be different. Like, as a manager for me, that will look different for every single person on my team, right? Because they all have different needs, right? And I think your manager took that approach with you, maybe because he wanted to, let you focus on your job and do something that you loved, and not have you like worry about that. And, maybe he had some insight into your personality that, encouraged him to do that. And that's, for me, what it means to fly air cover. It's going to look different for every single person on the team. And, sometimes I'm transparent about what those things are. Hey, so-and-so asked this of you, and I was like, no. Or I might ask, hey, do you want to do that? And if not, then I can take care of that for you. So I try and be as transparent as I possibly can. I think it's just, important from a communication standpoint, but it looks different.
I think the reason he didn't tell me that is because he'd know I'd leave, because I left within 2 months after he told me.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, there were other aspects where someone complained about something that I did, and he just called me up. It's like, hey, this guy is saying this about you. Can you talk to them and figure it out? Like, why are they pissed off? So I guess he played a liaison or a matchmaker, or whatever you want to call it. I got curious about those extra activities your other organization used to ask. Like, are we talking marketing? What kind of activities?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so it might be some kind of marketing stuff, or there was a lot of, in a big company with a lot of products, there was a lot of extra training sometimes that, wasn't necessarily applicable, and not just for my opinion, but, necessarily applicable to what we were trying to achieve. Special projects could have been anything, from, do you want to help create content for the sales kickoff meeting? Do you want to run a session for a sales kickoff meeting? Do you, want to take part in this, small group that's going to investigate, XYZ, and, do we want to change the product? Right. It could have been just about anything, but it was a special project because it wasn't necessarily related to, hey, we're selling software. I mean, maybe tangentially you could make a case for it, but Not always, not always.
Okay. And if one of your employees comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm interested in leadership, and like if you ever move on, I would like to take on your role, or I'd like to move on and take on the role," what kind of what warnings would you have for them? Like, hey, be careful of this in this role.
Well, I think I would start, first by asking, what is it about leadership that's interesting to you? Is it simple career progression, right? Or, do you really like the mentoring aspect, or like what is the attraction to leadership? And, I've worked with, again, just kind of in this role within SCs, some folks who, it's kind of interesting, some folks who really just want to be individual contributors. They're really, really good at what they do, and they know it, and that's great, and that's what they want to focus on. And sometimes, especially in a bigger organization, they're going to get asked to do things that are in leadership, and they don't want to do it. And you have to respect that. And then vice versa. For folks who have come to me and asked about leadership, it's well, what are the things that are attractive about that to you? And go find opportunities to get some experience doing those things, see how you feel about it, and then here are the other aspects of what it means to be in this role, kind of like you said, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens in a leadership role that's nobody talks about. It's not the funnest stuff that you do, and so I would just encourage folks who are interested to ask themselves why that is, and try and get the experience that would prepare them for taking advantage of that, I guess I would say.
Is there a right reason or a wrong reason for wanting to be a leader? For example, you mentioned that career progression. If someone just wants to be a leader, more money and prestige. I mean, maybe I'm being a little bit cynical, but that could be one of the reasons. I'm sure there isn't one, but would that be a wrong thing, a bad thing, or?
No, but no, right? Because if we don't do this because we're solving world hunger, right? Especially in sales, the money is an attractive thing, and growth as an individual is always important. But you don't just go into a leadership role and say I'm doing it for the money, because then you're not going to be, I don't think, the most effective leader, right? Because it's a very narrow focus, right? And you get measured on a whole host of different things as a leader versus when you're an individual contributor. And I think that sometimes can be a surprise, moving out of individual contributor role into a leadership role. And if you're just in it for the title and the money, those things can be a surprise, and it often leads to maybe an unsuccessful outcome, I think. Either the people that you lead are like, well, you're not really helping me with anything, or you don't continue to move up.
I'm just writing down some notes because you just sparked a lot of ideas in my head, which hurts sometimes. All right, so you mentioned leaders are measured differently. What are leaders measured on? Like, isn't it just, again, quota attainment, but for a larger number? I'm being facetious, by the way.
Yeah.
But what are
I mean, it's important. And again, we're in it to sell more software. And so, that is the predominant measure, but you want to also, you're measured on employee retention, and the growth of your employees. I've had, and sometimes that means, the employees stay with you and grow with your company, or you're preparing them for bigger positions in other companies, and you kind of have to be okay with that. You're measured on employee engagement, right? So that's a hot topic now. Like we just came out of our cycle of, doing the employee engagement surveys, and you're going to get measured on what your engagement score is, which is a measure of your relationship with your team, right?
What is an employee engagement? I'm out of the loop, I guess.
No. So it's how you get satisfaction surveys from companies, right? Are you likely to recommend this product or this company? It's essentially the employee company, internal facing version of that, right? Okay. So, and it, there's a series of questions, that are based in science, in terms of statistics and what it means, and you can draw certain conclusions. I mean, it's a big space, right? Measuring it, and all the big companies do it for sure. In my experience,
Maybe
you don't get your yearly survey and say, would you, recommend this company as a place to work to your friends or something like that? You don't.
not in any company I've worked for so far, and I've worked for Nortel, so
Yeah.
the answer is no. No, Alcatel-Lucent and a couple of other smaller companies. So I've worked for bigger ones.
Yeah, interesting. I would say in the last few that I've worked for, it's definitely been a thing, and it's a measure of a leader, that engagement score. So you start to collect some poor scores over consecutive periods, then you need attention as a manager. So those are kind of core measures, right? If your employees aren't and your team isn't being as productive as you would expect, you gotta have to kind of unpack that a little bit and figure out what's going on. So
something you said that you're judged on employee retention, but also on supporting the SE to move into something bigger or better.
Employee growth, right?
Yeah. But if they leave the company, you prepared them and then they left the company, wouldn't that affect your retention score?
It could, right? I mean, it does. If I think if a more of a negative effect on your retention score if they've only been there 6 months.
Right.
But if they've been there 5 years and you've worked with them over the course of 5 years and they leave, then I don't think it has such an impact. And hopefully in that time period you've been also moving people into the team and hiring, and so there's a balance there. But for me, that retention is not. Retention is more negatively affected if somebody joins your team and 6 months later they decide to move out of your team or they move out of the organization. Right. That's not really what I'm talking about in terms of building growth and
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that if someone comes to you and they say, I want to be a leader, what qualities would you look for to say that this has the potential or doesn't? And you mentioned you'd give them more exercises or something to lead. Like, can you give me an example of something?
So, I think qualities in, a leader is, one, being successful in the role as an individual contributor, having some success. And to me, that just demonstrates knowledge of what's required, right? You have to know what's required day in and day out so that you understand what the expectations are for the folks on your team if you move into that role. In terms of important qualities, just in general, empathy, I think, is one of the most important qualities, and it's, good emotional intelligence, I think is really important, because I think you mentioned it before, there can be a lot of politics, and this just exacerbates in bigger organizations. You kind of have to be sensitive to that, understand what's happening. And then in terms of preparing people for leadership, you have to be kind of sometimes creative in finding opportunities, but do you want to mentor new hires, mentor them through the cycle of onboarding and orienting to the company and getting proficient on the solution? Can you help a new person do that, right? And that's a great opportunity for someone who's interested in leadership. Can you, and so you might do that. And then, oftentimes, if I was going to be away on vacation or something, if there was someone on my team who had expressed to me an interest in leadership, I might tap them to cover for me while I was going to be away. Hey, do you want to run point on these things while I'm out? So that they begin to kind of understand what that daily cadence is like. What are the asks that you're getting from the different parts of the organization? Things like that. To give them a sense of what it might be like. And you just, continually look for those opportunities.
Was there anyone ever, you don't have to name names, or any companies that came to you and said, like, I would want to become a leader, and you thought, no, this is not going to happen?
For sure. Was I always right? I don't know. But, again, I think if I think about the two things that I think are, really important, empathy and, emotional intelligence, and I think folks that that I'm thinking of tended not to be super strong in those areas, kind of like almost bull in a China shop type of scenario. And I think we've all seen and maybe even worked for managers like that. I know I have, and I didn't enjoy it. And so,
Yeah.
that would be my take.
Yeah. And these are all based on, like you said, a couple of things that just sparked all these ideas in my head. You've moved through a few companies, right?
For sure.
You probably had the chance to talk to leadership within that new company that you're joining. What were you looking for to see? Probably you had options to move to different companies also. You weren't stuck. What made you make a decision like, yeah, I'll go work for this leader versus that leader?
I think rapport, kind of, in sales and in this role particularly, what is their vision for how pre-sales, right? So this is very specific to what we do, not necessarily maybe applicable to like every person, but in this space, for me, the alignment between pre-sales and sales is the most important, right? So if I'm going to come in as an individual contributor, especially as a leader, that alignment has to be there, right? So understanding, like for what we do and, at this company and what I, expect of my team, it's not just to show up at, the beck and call of an account executive and, turn out a demo and then never hear about that that opportunity again, right? The whole demo dolly kind of, kind of name that sometimes gets applied to sales engineers. And so I always ask a lot of questions about, how have you worked with sales engineers in the past? What's your vision of how that relationship should work? And I'm trying to find alignment there. And that's super important to me.
Okay, nice. We've been talking for a bit. I usually move on to the not so fire on, but I want to make sure that I asked you all the questions that you wanted me to ask you, or if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about before we moved on.
No, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I think this is great. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's move on to the not so fire on. It's not so fire on, so you can take your time answering questions. And these are the same 4 questions I've asked almost every guest. You already answered one, so I got angry a little bit about that earlier, which is, what do you love about sales engineering? So let me change that a little bit. What do you love about leading sales engineering teams?
What I love about leading both the teams and just a part of the broader organization is really, having the ability to shape the success of the organization, right? And for me, that, of course, we're here to sell software. So how can I help align my team against that goal and, being a part of the strategy that impacts that goal? So for me as a leader of sales engineers, it's, being able to have the relationship with the leadership of the organization to say, can we do this or that? Or, I really think we need to approach this opportunity this way, and collaborate with the team and give my team the, I don't want to say the freedom, because everybody has the freedom to do whatever they want, but sometimes you don't feel like you have the agency to do it. So I like to, and want to empower the team to be able to speak up. We've all been doing this for some time. How do you think this opportunity should run? And so for me, that's really exciting, and I really love that about the role.
It's interesting. It's like, yeah, everybody has the freedom to do whatever they want, but not everybody knows it.
Right.
So the fact that you just allow them to do it, it's good. I was talking to an SE manager. I don't know if I told you this before, but he took 2 weeks off for vacation, and that's when his team figured out, oh, we can take 2 weeks off. Right? So they had the freedom to take it, but they didn't know they could take it. So it's like the baby elephant with a rope and doesn't. Anyways.
No, totally get it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're in a leadership position. You probably have the ability to change stuff about sales engineering. Is there one thing that you would love to change about it? And, how would you go about doing that?
One thing I would love to change about it. I don't think I would have been doing it for as long as I have been if it wasn't pretty much aligned with, what I really enjoy doing, right? For me, it's the, working with so many different interesting and unique customers, helping solve their problems through technology, and being rewarded for that. I think, the care and feeding of account executives and salespeople in this role, I think can be different, in every organization. And to me, that's always the variable, right? Is who are you sitting across the conference room table from, or the Zoom meeting from? And I've been really lucky in my career to work, with some really amazing account executives who we've sold a lot of stuff with, and they're 20 years later, I still consider them friends. But just like not everybody's suited for sales engineering, not everybody's suited to be in sales as a sales executive, and that's probably sometimes the biggest roadblock to success, and really, wanting to get in front of the Zoom camera every day.
Okay. And do SEs have, usually in your experience, do SEs have a say in who their salesperson could or would be?
No,
No.
no. I've worked, and I've seen this model fall away over time. There was once a time where a sales engineer would be paired with the one or two account executives. Either it's because you were in the same region, or it's just, how the company operated. But I've seen that just fall away over time. It's hard to scale, and, not very
You still have
sustainable.
that.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the industry that you're in.
Mhm.
Networking, it's very prevalent.
Yep.
SaaS, not so much anymore.
Yeah.
Yes, but yeah. Okay.
So yeah, no, but you have to be, as a manager, sensitive to personalities. And so if I can, shape some of those assignments a little bit differently, which you have to balance because you have a team, and you can't create this culture where someone always seems to get like the best sales rep. And even sometimes I would have sales reps call me and say, hey, I really want to work with so and so. And I would have to push back a little bit and say, well, you can't always work with that person. We have to, and so that's a challenge. So my off the cuff answer is no. You have to be able to work with everybody and be successful with everyone.
Why is it? Why can't a salesperson request a specific SE if they work well together?
Well, again, in a bigger team, it doesn't scale, and it sends the wrong message, which is you're better at this than this person. And again, it becomes a scalability, because usually if one sales rep is doing that, more than one sales rep is doing that.
Yeah.
And as a sales engineer, like, I can remember being an individual contributor where, I was the one that the, account executives wanted to work with. And that feels great as an individual contributor, if somebody's coming to you and saying, oh, we've been, let's keep doing this together. But as a manager, you have to take a different view, and you have to spread success across the team. And, you have to balance that.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So we're pulled one-to-one, at least in my old company.
Yeah.
And my salesperson got promoted to director, and they wanted to hire a new salesperson. And they had me meet him for like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had to say it. I was like fairly early in my career. It's like, oh, they let me meet my sales guy, but they had already made the decision.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nice to get the feeling that, oh yeah, I had a say in it, because
Mm-hmm.
we were going to be married kind of together for the foreseeable future. Yeah, it makes sense.
Interesting.
All right. Is there a book or resource you would recommend, whether it's for sales engineering to get better as a sales engineer, or if you prefer, about leadership?
I'll be honest. When I read for pleasure.
Okay.
To your point, like, we could do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so I, if you look at my bookshelf, I just pointed, it's sitting behind me, but I've got the background on, but it's mostly fiction or nonfiction about topics that are, not work related. For me, that brings enjoyment and joy to my life. I don't necessarily want to read about, anything that's super work related. I think there are great avenues of learning if you want to grow as a leader. Like, at my last company, they actually had like a leader mentorship program that I went through. They paired you with like a mentor, and I found that super valuable as a leader. For me, that was way more valuable than reading a book. Finding someone who, could, kind of walk me through just different components of being a successful leader, identifying areas where I was, creating issues that I shouldn't have, like just, I don't want to say, it was almost like therapy for leaders,
Yeah.
but, and it might be characterizing it wrong, but for me, that was one of the most valuable things that I went through as a leader, because it helped me then identify, oh, I'm doing this thing, that now I know is like, it's like a warning sign, it's in whatever context. So for me, that was valuable. So I think of books maybe differently than a lot of people in what we do. It's just,
Okay. What pleasure book would you recommend then?
I just read this book. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's I'll have to look it up. The guy who wrote like Devil in the White City. Oh, Eric Larson. Eric Larson. And he wrote this book about Churchill. So it's nonfiction, but super, super interesting. Churchill during the Blitz in London. It was called The Violin something. I'm going to have to look it up. This is terrible. I was just talking about it the other day. But it's about Churchill in World War II, but only during the period of the Blitz. And it was just how important he was in his role as a leader of the country in maintaining the British people's, strength and fortitude during what was just a horrific, you know, attack by the Germans sustained over so many, days and months. So, I'm gonna look it up real quick.
The Splendid and the Vile.
The Splendid and the Vile, yeah, yeah. So I read that over the summer. That was a really, really fantastic book.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to pick that up. I don't generally read for pleasure anymore. I don't know why. All right.
Opposite.
Last question of the not so fire round. Is there a habit you're working on today to improve, whether it's in your personal or even your professional life?
A habit. I think actually it's something that I started doing at the start of not the exact start of the pandemic, but after a couple of months when everyone was working from home and it was like one Zoom meeting after another all the time, was actually turning off my computer like at 5:30 or whenever, right? Because when your computer's on and you can just turn off, flip the lid, you can like check, and we're all walking by our home offices. And it's after a little while, I could kind of sense like even the stress in my team and like everybody's asking me for this and that. And I'm like, turn off your computer. Like, turn it off. Don't just shut the lid, turn it off, because it takes effort to go in and then turn it on and then have it boot up and do all the things. So actually, that's just something that I've really, the way we work today, really try to maintain a clear separation for when my day is over. I'm not going to just, open my computer, see what's going on, check things. That separation, I thought I was good at, but then during the pandemic became a lot harder. And so I'm trying to really focus on, doing that and being present at home, even though I work from home.
Did it take you a while to get used to it? Did it take you a while to get used to it, or was it easier than you thought?
It took a while, because I think, again, what's unique about what we do, like, the sales, the account executives, the sales reps, traveling a lot, right? They're always traveling to visit their customers. And so, working from home, oftentimes I was traveling too, but when I was home, there was always this cadence of, every minute of my day wasn't in a meeting. And as soon as the pandemic hit and the sales folks weren't traveling anymore, all of a sudden, every minute of your day is in a meeting, because and rightfully so, right? They're still scheduling meetings. They don't want to lose momentum and all the things they might have done on their own, on a trip. Now they're in a Zoom meeting, and so they're inviting you to those. And I mean, I just had so many days where it was from 8 to 6, like people just picking apart your calendar, trying to fit you, time with you in. And at the end of the day, you're like, did I eat? Did I go to the bathroom? Like, I didn't even know. And the other thing that I try and do is just put blocks on my calendar to take a walk or, eat lunch or something. And it's the same thing I encourage the folks on my team to do, which is block the time. You don't have to explain it to me. You don't have to explain it to anyone. Just put a block on your calendar if you need that time. And I always push vacation, take every minute of your vacation. So those things are like super important to me.
I don't have a problem with the eating part. Like I know what I mean. But right now, just a thought popped in my head, and I might try it. Is after every meeting, I should book like 10 minutes afterwards, just because I need to send notes. Otherwise, I end up sending it at like midnight. So or whatever. So just 10 minutes, go to the bathroom, come back and write the notes up and send it versus having.
One of the account executives I work with has started scheduling like meetings for like 55 minutes, right? So nobody's going to, start a meeting like that overlaps with that then. So they're going to always start a meeting like on the hour. So I'll always have that if I'm working with him, have like that 5-minute buffer potentially between, because he sticks to it. It's my other peeve is when you don't like stick to when you book a 30-minute meeting and you need an hour or vice versa.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much what I've seen, like booking an hour meeting and then you go 5-10 minutes over.
Yeah.
You're late to the next one.
The whole day.
All right. Well, Julie, this has been great. Thank you again for coming on and being open about your experiences. So thank you.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise.
All right.
Thank you, Julie, for coming on, and thank you for listening. We covered so many topics, and it's interesting how Julie was talking about rating for SE leaders, how they're rated, and the survey that they do internally within some companies. And it's funny how we think that because some things happen in our company or some things don't happen in our company, that means they happen everywhere else. And I've worked for big companies. They don't do any of these surveys. I guess they don't care about what their employees think, or if they would recommend other people to join the company. So it's interesting to hear that. And I learned something new. So it felt strange not knowing about that, given that I've worked for like 4 different large-ish organizations at least. So what do you guys think? Let me know. Jump into the comments. What do you see your leaders do for you? Because they do a lot more than we see. And if you're a leader and you have some experience in shielding SEs from different experiences or different things, let me know. Is there a specific topic that you enjoyed today? How about we just leave it with that question? And with that, this is Ramsey signing off.